Ask the Podcast Coach for August 1st, 2020.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, kicking it in Nebraska like nobody else can. Look at that. What is on your shirt? The story behind trivia.
Story behind. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is the soothing sounds of one Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good. We made it through July. Another month has come. Seems like we're still making it through. So the good news is we have a coffee pour.
So we do have a coffee pour.
Again, do we have? Are we good? I didn't even ask you. Good for August.
We're good. Yeah.
All right, that's good. Good that we're working out business during the live show. Yeah.
Good. But yes, in fact, I actually have. So I saw this in Facebook. A guy named Dave Olander said, "Hey, maybe someone has experience. I'm working on a free digital product to use as a lead generator for my email list. Does anyone know of a good free route to make it stand out and not be a blank PDF with words on it?" Well, it's not free, but if you want to look good, podcastbranding.co is a great place to go to get lead magnets, as well as album artwork, as well as your website, anything you want to look pretty and professional on. Mark is the man. He's got 13 years in graphic artistry. Is that a word? Graphic artistry?
Yeah, it is now.
It is now. Yeah. And he's also a podcaster, which makes it great. And you're looking at a guy who's going to do one-on-one to work with you. He's not going to go grab a template off of something and blah, blah, blah. So if you want to look great, if you're looking for some great artwork, a great website, go check out Mark at podcastbranding.co and tell him that you heard about him on the Ask the Podcast Coach. And I wanted to talk a little bit today. Oh, now I got to make sure I have this. Okay, I'm going to put Jim on the left screen and everything else will be on the right. Shane, yay, left side. Shane had asked in another group about podcast media kits. And one of his things was, I wish there was a way to somehow get all the stats in one place. And so one of the things, and I'm going to do a fair amount of share screening here, but I'm going to do my best here to always explain what I'm doing so that those of you that are watching on or listening are not lost because you're not watching. So I'm just going to Google and I'm going to type in Edison Research. In fact, you can see I just did this, Infinite Dial 2020. And what's great is you can go, it's right there on edisonresearch.com. And they actually have a PDF of this, which I will throw in the chat room. So I'm going to copy that link and throw it over in the chat room. And this has this is a great way to show the power of podcasting. This is where you can, and it's a PDF. You don't have to even sign up with an email list. And this is where, you can see that, how it's gone up every single year. So here, that's on smartphones, but that kind of ties in with podcasting and such. And it's a great way just to say, look, I think it's 60, 70 million people a month listen to podcasts. And this goes into radios versus podcasting and things of that nature. But if you want to show somebody how podcasting is still growing, and if you get in now, you're on the right track because podcasting has gone up every year, and how in some cases how Facebook is going down, which is kind of interesting. It's a great study, and I'm running out of things to say as I'm scrolling as fast as I can to get to the podcast part. But it is a great report for that. And they also have different ones for, here's one for monthly audio, but that also includes satellite radio. But this is one of the reports where it actually shows that podcasting is now more popular than satellite radio.
Hold on, stop for a second. I think you got an interesting. Go back up to right there. Audio brands listened to in the last month. The one right below it. Yeah, you get. I mean, I think a lot of times podcasters are asking the question, "Where do I aim what do I aim at? Like, do I need to be on Spotify? Do I need to worry about this or that?" And this slide here, of course, what we're looking at. So it's audio brands listened to in the last month, 2018, 2019, 2020 listed out. And of course, Spotify is on top. Oh, except they're not. Like this is one of those things that's kind of interesting, that Pandora. Now I know they're talking about audio here, but I think, and I think this report says this, there's more folks listening to audio than listening to podcasts. So when we think of audio, we think of like music, right? That's all right. And so Pandora is still a big player in this space and needs to be paid attention to. So Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music coming in at 4. Isn't that kind of interesting, Dave? That the guys who kicked it off are 4. And then 5, huge surprise, iHeartRadio.
Yeah.
Really? Like people are really listening to that app? They're really listening to music on that app? I kind of thought it was a joke.
Well, you know why? I don't listen to the radio much, but every time I do, I hear, and if I'm on whatever channel, I either hear an ad for iHeartRadio, the #1 place for podcasts, and that's what they say, as well as all your favorite music and the #1 place for podcasts. And if there's a sports station I listen to, take the fan with you on radio.com's app. It's the only way that you can listen anywhere you are. And I mean, every time I listen to the radio, one of those commercials comes on and I'm like, man, they are pimping the app big time. So maybe that's part of it.
This report does show Pandora is losing market share and Spotify is gaining market share in the audio space. So they're now even. They're technically even right now in this report. And so it wouldn't surprise me if next year if Spotify becomes #1. I thought they were already #1, just to be honest.
Yeah. James Cridland just had a thing where Spotify had I don't know if it's yearly, quarterly, like, hey, here's where we are kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they explained how podcast listenership is just through the roof over there. Yeah. And they said it's all about one of their strategies is exclusivity, but they also said we're an open platform and they did say they want to focus on the user experience. And they just did roll out, I have yet to look at it, but Spotify now is using HTML in their show notes because their show notes were just horrible. And from what I understand, they've started to kind of get that.
Well, Amazon's making a move there as you go keep going to find the podcast stuff. Yeah. But in that report, Amazon Music has made, I think, probably the biggest percentage jump in this report. And so another area, I just think as podcasters, we kind of need to think about, okay, where are people listening?
Yeah, but this is the slide I love. In 2020, 28% of people were listening to podcasts, 24% were listening to satellite radio in the car. And it's like, oops, guess what? We just kind of jumped over you there in the car.
AM/FM is sliding back, but slowly. Yeah. Slowly. Yeah. It's still 81 on that. So, you went from an 82 to an 81. So AM/FM is holding. I thought that thing would just plummet, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, so here you can see an estimated 212 million people listen to podcasts in 2020. I believe that is
up from 70. 75 now. 75 million. Is that what's the 75 mean? Percentage market share? Percentage of people who've listened?
Yeah, who
US
are
population.
familiar with the term.
Okay.
They've heard the phrase. And then I think the next one is, people actually listening. 155 million have ever listened to a podcast. Okay. And then you get down to here, how many people listen to a month? And it's weird because you kind of go, it's only 37%. It's 104 million people. So this is where you
32, right? Up from 32 in 2019.
Yeah. And then this is the joy of data. All right, you can sit there and say, in 2020, podcasting saw the biggest surge in listenership in the last 12 years because nowhere else have we jumped 5%. So there's all sorts of ways you can spin the numbers and choose your data.
2019 and 2020 have been good years. Let's be clear, right? Just to go from 26% to 32% is a big jump, and then 32% to 37% is a big jump. And of course, each of those has corresponding. I mean, these are now millions in numbers, and so 1920 has been good years.
Yeah. So this would be a good place to get hey, here's how powerful our podcast is, podcasting is. Then I went into Spotify, and this is at podcasters.spotify.com, and we're looking at the School of Podcasting, which does horrible on Spotify. And you can see where apparently I put it on in July. But if I go, let me go to a different.
This is this show or this is School of Podcasting?
No,
School
it turns out. Now I'm glad I did this because it turns out Ask the Podcast Coach, not on Spotify. Dave never added that, and I was like, well, that's good to know.
There you go.
But you can see I'm getting 4, 11 maybe. So I'm getting maybe double digits on the School of Podcasting. But then this audience tab is kind of handy because what's cool is I can see that overall 72% male, 22% female, 6%. Not going to tell you. And then if you're like, if you put your mouse over here, it's an age kind of graph here, and it breaks it down. I can see, oh, that means for 28 to 34-year-olds, it's 80% male, 15% female. And I was like looking at this going, oh, and I also see that my audience listens to Taylor Swift, Kanye West, Shawn Menendez, and Jack Johnson, but yet it's male. And I was like, really? There's no Metallica? No, No,
apparently you're on Spotify, you skew down. Your audience age skews down. So you're probably talking younger. These are probably 20-something podcasters that have come across you on Spotify and are listening to you there. I would imagine that's probably the case.
This next thing I'm going to do, I've never done. And that was like, I was sitting there going, oh, come on, Spotify. There's got to be a way to download this as a CSV, and at the very top, right next to this all-time button in the upper right-hand corner, download as a CSV.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, awesome. And so we don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to get. I'm hoping it's this breakdown. This is really the part I wanted. So if I open that up and our
you're
good friend
get
Mike,
the raw numbers. Yeah, you're just going to get the raw numbers. Yeah,
it's all the streaming numbers.
Too small for me to see, but
and it's the download numbers. I don't think it's anything. Nope, it's only one tab. So nothing. All the demographic data, which is what I wanted, is what I was hoping I could download. And no, so you're gonna have to basically retype that stuff. If you go into Podcast Connect, our good friends at Apple, podcasts with an S, podcastconnect.apple.com. This is where you can go in and see, you have to go into the podcast analytics section of that. And then here's where you could say things like 84% of the people that listen to the School of Podcasting are subscribed. And then you can go down, and these numbers are always, so I get 73, 83, 71.
What are you reading?
That is what percentage of. So at my last episode, your favorite podcast episode of your podcast and why, people listen to 73% of that.
There you go.
And
Yep.
So
how does that compare to other weeks?
Other weeks were 73, 83 for podcast best practices. The ripple effect of podcasting, 75%.
Those are probably pretty solid numbers, Dave.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
In YouTube land, 50% is like, wow.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I was like, okay, but I don't think there's no demographic data because again, Apple is all about privacy. So then there's our good friend Stitcher. So here, I believe if I go into episode stats, not as cool as Apple. Oh, they've changed these since the last time I was in here. If I click on this, so I had 11 listens of that last episode. And it doesn't, average completion rate, 64%. So it's a little lower on Spreaker. The other Apple was 73%. Here we're at 64. The average listening time was 32 minutes. So that's good to know if you are doing ads because you better get your ad in before the 32-minute mark or they're not going to make it. So, and I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, this shows me that for some reason, a lot of people were skipping. That's interesting. I bet that's where my ad is. It doesn't show me exactly where this is. Or no, those are dates. I take that back. I thought that was time. But that's another area where you can get some insights. Obviously, if you go into Libsyn or whoever your media host is, you can go in and now here we actually want to take this back. Let's go back to Ask the Podcast Coach since that's this show. But this was where you can get into your numbers. And this is where what you don't want to do is inflate your numbers. Because I could, if I wanted to, go in here and say, hey, Ask the Podcast Coach we are getting somewhere between 9,000 and let's go this back to the first of the year. This will be interesting to see, actually, see how COVID. Wow, actually, it looks like we went up. So we had 4,000 downloads in January. We went up to 10,000 downloads in May, and then last month was 6,000. So it's an interesting curve. But the problem is I don't quote monthly stats because, as you can see, they're all over the place. And this is what I tell people. All it takes is one person to find your show and download your entire back catalog, and all of a sudden you've got an extra 400 downloads that week. So I like to go over to episodes, and then you can see where my top rated one was from February 20th, 2015. Our latest episodes are anywhere from, let's go back a month. Let's go back to June. So anywhere between 400 and 600.
Yeah, those are good numbers.
Yeah, it's not bad. I'll take
this
that.
This is on
Ask the Podcast Coach.
No, it's on Libsyn. We're looking.
This is on Libsyn, yeah. And if I wanted to, I could go in and really let's go in here to last week's episode, which was released on the 25th. And I can come in here and say, look, show me July 25th through today. And in a week, we had 496 downloads. Some people look at that as those are probably subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah. That'd be a good. I think that'd be a good. I like 3 days. I kind of like the 3 days on a subscriber because that really those are what we call most actively engaged at Gallup, right? You could take it out to 7, and that probably pulls in some of those that are engaged, and then you're probably 7 to 14 is neutral. Like they're not, they're there, but they're not. And then, you have some on the backside that drops off. So that's good. So you'd say, we'd have about 400 subscribers or so to this.
Yeah. If I look at one from May, when we had that, for whatever reason, spike, this episode was released on the 2nd. So if I go here and say, hey, May 2nd to,
a lot going on in May around the world.
Yeah. June 2nd. We had 649 in that's for the month. That's not the week. But if I go back and say, hey, let's go May 2nd to May 9th, 525 up from whatever we had before. So, and I always say, just pick a number, whatever it is, 7 days, 15 days, 30 days, whatever. And you can run that and then compare it to your other ones. And that's how you compare if you're growing or not. But this way I could look at this. And like you said, I could say we get somewhere between 400 and 600 downloads an episode within the first 30 days. And you could put that into, a media kit. But the other thing, Glenn the Geek is such a Glenn the Geek, a genius. And I got to be careful because he shared this in the School of Podcasting group and kind of said, let's keep this on the download. But he did ask one question that I was like, oh, that's brilliant. He asked, have you bought anything from any of the sponsors at the Horse Radio Network in the last year? And the number was very impressive. And I thought it was great because number one, he said in the last year, not the last month, not the last 6 weeks, in a year, have you bought anything? Because podcasting is a long tail. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, whatever that number is, and again, his was very impressive, that's really the stat you want in your media kit. Mm-hmm. It's not, I've got X amount of downloads. Like the people that listen buy stuff, and then he also then, because you think about it, you're trying to explain to your potential sponsor, here is the power of my audience. And also, if you can, here's the lack of power of these other things that you might be thinking about sponsoring. So he also asked, have you bought any sponsors out of, let's say, a magazine? And the answer was not impressive.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's brilliant stuff. So the other thing you could do is go into Apple Podcasts. And if you have any good reviews, do a screenshot. If you've, I'm not starting Apple Podcasts. Oh boy, words cannot express how I just, every time I start that, it's just like my whole computer just goes and just dies. But if you wanted to, make a screenshot of anything, if you are unfamiliar with it, here is my my messy desktop. So here is that. And if I wanted to make a screenshot of this Droppler icon on my desktop, all you have to do on a PC, I'm not sure what to do on a Mac, but if I type in snip, there is a snipping tool. It's free, and you just click on it, and then all you have to do is kind of picture this in a box. So I'm going to click in what would be the upper left-hand corner of the Doppler icon here, and it turns this screen this weird kind of white thing. And I'm just going to click in the imaginary upper left-hand corner and drag down and to the right until I get Doppler in the middle of this little box. And when I let go of my mouse, presto, I now have a screenshot of that. So it's really easy to go in and take a screenshot of your stats or anything, or like I said, a review in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or any other places where people are reviewing your show. That will show again that people are engaged. And that's where, again, as much as ratings and reviews don't really help you get found, although people love to repeat that, and it's just not true, it does show engagement. So if you could say we've got, 500, 137, however many you have, Command Shift 4 on the keyboard on a Windows. Yeah. Beautiful. So those are some things you can do to make a cheat sheet, a media kit, and get you going, and then keep raising your price until they say no.
That's it. I think that's the best advice somebody ever gave me was set it. If you're not getting any business, lower it. If you have too much business, keep raising it.
Yeah.
Just a good idea.
I interviewed Joe Salsihai from Stacking Benjamins for my book that is now apparently coming out next month. I actually saw the finished cover with all the blurbs and stuff, and I'm like, oh, now we're getting close. And when I was interviewing him, he said, yeah, he goes, I just kept raising my prices until somebody said no, because if without doing that, you're always going to go to bed wondering, was I leaving money on the table?
Yeah.
And he goes, I figured it out that I wasn't. And he just got a book deal. Speaking of books and all, I'm not sure, he hasn't released the name of the book yet. He said, but it is funny, which of course, if you know Joe, he's all about the funny. In fact, Stacking Benjamins is it's an interesting podcast because Joe purposely said, he said, this is not your mom's financial thing. And the whole kind of running gag is we're not here to, you're not supposed to learn anything from the show. It's just this whole almost like Letterman, if you think about it. Letterman, when in the early days of David Letterman, he was always almost making fun of the network. And that's what kind of Joe is. And I saw a thing on Facebook where he got a book deal. So that's cool. Anyway.
That snipping tool that you showed is actually going through a transformation in Windows. So if you're on the next version, it's called Snip and Sketch. There we go. Snip and Sketch.
I love those guys. Back in the 60s, they were on like Laugh-In.
Yeah, totally.
Great comedy duo. Yeah.
I think a little cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon. So that's moving a little more functionality in that. They're kind of blowing that out. So you'll see that change. Windows users, you'll see that change here coming up.
There we go. And if you have any questions, you can always come on over to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, and that will drop you right into the video here. So we prefer that you have some sort of clothes on. That's always a benefit. And we are here every Saturday. If you're we're only on YouTube today, but we're always at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. And let's see here. Jim, I'll let you pick. Finding co-host, confused radio guy, scared. We already did this one. Microsoft Edge with Jim. That was last week's. Oh, yeah. Lead magnet we already did, or live audience.
Dave, I will take confused radios guy for 400.
All right. This was from Paul Mumford. This was out in some Facebook group. I forget which one. Can someone help me out here? I launched my first podcast about 9 weeks ago, and with a long career in commercial radio behind me, I thought I knew how to do it. I intentionally decided not to listen to many others in my niche. I did it the way I thought was best based on my experience. But here's the thing. I've now started listening to a whole bunch of podcasts in my niche, and they all seem to sound the same. It's like they all follow the same format. Quality differs, of course, from okay to unlistenable. He says, I've yet to find a really good one, but I'm not sure they're out there. But the ones I've heard are literally like podcasting by numbers. So I'm curious, did you listen to other podcasts in your niche before starting out? Did you base your own on someone else's, or did you decide to approach it differently? Which approach do you think works best for you? So hence confused radio guy.
Yeah. I'll just, while you're thinking, I'll just start I absolutely. So when I came out with Home Gadget Geeks, which was Home Tech when it first came out, 450 episodes ago, I definitely based it on Leo Laporte's This Week in Tech. I mean, that was, think about it, 10 years ago, it was a big deal, right? All the tech heads were out there podcasting. Most of the podcasts were tech related. It was a very technology heavy. And we had done a show called the Home Server Show, which I wanted to do more tech beyond just the home server technology. But I absolutely based it on what Leo was doing. Now, I didn't copy it, but I kind of did, and then made it my own. So over the years, of course, we've changed it. One of the things I did in the opening statement, I say, we cover news, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. That's kind of the tagline of Home Gadget Geeks. So when I don't have a guest and it's just the co-host and I, we cover news, reviews, product updates, and conversation. We follow sometimes I move those around just kind of based on the material that I have. But in the show notes, why not reuse that, right? So since then, I have morphed away from being that way with it. But on the surface, it's still the kind of, I would listen to Windows Weekly every week still. Paul Thurrott, Mary Jo Foley, Leo Laporte. And it's just it's topic after topic after topic, and that's kind of what we do. And so, yeah, no, I'll admit I kind of copied. Has anybody called me out on it? No. I mean, we've gathered our listeners, the ones that we're going to get. I still get new ones. I still get notes and emails from folks. So I think it's okay. Like, you don't want to blatantly just rip somebody off, but make it your own. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's been my experience.
Yeah. I think my shows are generally, like you said, podcasting by numbers, which is always introduce the show, introduce what's on the episode. And then this is where the creative part, then get to the content. And that could be however you want to get to the content and what is it a lightning round? Is it an interview? Is it whatever, just bring value. And then the end is, I would just recommend people have one call to action, which is not something I do very well at all. I'm horrible.
Nobody does. They have 15, catch me on Spotify, catch me on Stitcher, catch me on iHeart, subscribe to Patreon, go subscribe on YouTube, all those things. But
I always recommend people go out and try to find a podcast like theirs and do two things. Listen to the show. And so if I go listen to, I don't know, Better Podcasting by SP and Steven, I can listen to that and go, okay, great. What did you like about it? I like the questions at the end. Okay, what would you not do on your show? I would not use the word pod back, because I think that's shoehorning the word pod into something that doesn't need it. And I'm not a huge fan of their segment of How I Save My Podcast, because every time I listen to it, I'm like, isn't the answer always just have a backup? I mean, it's but so I'm not going to do that. That didn't, but I like the Q&A part. Right. And so then you go, okay, how can I do Q&A? Because you're not really stealing that, because it's going to be different questions. Or it might be, just listen to somebody else and go, ooh, that's cool. Because I think most good ideas don't come out of the bottle. It's not like, hey, let's see what this is. Wow, that's amazing. It's usually like, hey, let's try this. Oh, that's not bad. What if we did this though? Ooh, wait, I know. What if we tried? And so like on the 5th, 7th iteration of an idea, you go, ooh, that would be really cool. And you didn't open up the bottle and that came out. It was like, oh, what if we tried? We could do this and that, So, so I always recommend go. And the other thing you can do is when you do that, these might be people you network with later. 2, you're also going to find out, wow, I thought there were 10 shows about podcasting. Turns out half of these have faded. They're not here anymore. Yeah. So, and then
staying around is hard. Like I think people don't realize the hardest part of podcasting is just staying on it. It's just doing it every week or day or month or whatever you're doing. If you can, every time I think about quitting like Home Gadget Geeks, And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll quit at 500. It's coming up. Or, well, it's really next year. But, I'm thinking maybe I'll quit at 500. And then I'm like, well, no. Like, what? How hard is this? I get a guest. I asked somebody, I needed a guest for next week. I knew a guy. I sent him a note on Messenger. Can you do this with me in 2 weeks? Sure. Okay. Like that works well for me and my audience, right? I have a group of hosts, a pool of other hosts I can pull from. But if you can outlive your competition in a lot of cases and still be interesting, that doesn't just because you're the only one out there doesn't mean everybody's going to listen.
Yeah.
Either. But there's something about longevity and stability that is very, very good. People like that.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, Larry King, I think half the reason Larry King is Larry King, the guy's been around forever. And over those years,
he still around? Is Larry still on?
I think Larry has a podcast now, but he is, but on the other hand, Poughkeepsie, you're on. Yeah. But also Larry, you either love Larry or you hate Larry. I have, every time I watch an interview, my favorite, if you want to have fun, go to YouTube and type in Jerry Seinfeld, Larry King, because Larry, his whole thing is, I don't do any research. I want to be just like the listener. I'm like, well, then there's a really good chance you're going to look stupid, Larry. And he did. He asked Seinfeld if Seinfeld was fired or did he quit? And Seinfeld's like, really? You don't know? It's like, come on. It's the #1 show on TV. Larry, what's wrong with you?
Do a little research.
Yeah, Larry. A little. So we had a question. I don't know that I have an answer, but Mathematica Humanista. Dave and Jim, are there any good books about the history of the language/communication used in radio since its beginning? Sound clips from the past, sounds and sites on the internet with that. I don't.
Kyle had a good answer right below.
There you go.
If you click on it.
Yeah. There you go. The Radio Drama Handbook, which Kyle's into the whole radio drama thing.
Yeah.
Richard, you want to talk about something that takes a lot of time? Oofa. Richard Hand and Mary Trainer, the Radio Drama Handbook. Lots of history of radio drama for both America and Britain. Right. So he says, I want to make an episode evaluating the old language and style, but I need some material to study. So there you go. That's a place to start. Language is fun.
I know old-timey radio, one of the things, and I shouldn't say old-timey because that makes you think of the 40s and the 50s here, and when they talked funny. I think you can do it that way. You've got the voice for that.
It's a humdinger. Oh, yeah, here he is. Look at those dames. They're great.
They didn't talk that way normally.
No. Like it's not like the guy goes, "Hey, honey, I'm home. All right, hey, that coffee would be great." Yeah,
but they did that for effect, right? So sometimes you think, did they really talk to each other that way? No, they didn't. It was just radio.
Like the first guy, the program director said, he's like, "All right, it's sunny and warm. It's Johnson's up to bat here. Count 3 and 2. And right. Somebody said, "Hey, can you do Johnson's up to bat? It's 3 and 2." It's like, yeah, do that. I don't know. Who knows?
Do it that way. Like it's more exciting. It's more riveting. But I do know if we think about the heyday of radio advertising, I think when it was the most effective, which would be the 70s and 80s, I think they were really good at reminding people often. And now you would do that because you may only get people in cars and you got people for maybe 7 minutes, and so they have to kind of constantly be reminding. But I do think there is that trick in a podcast, and we do this with things like this. And we'll take a break to do this. But like mid-show, we have a mid-show coffee pour, right? So
we do.
We do. You play the sound effect, right? And I'll give you a time while I finish doing this. I'll give you time to pull up those awesome subscribers.
Supporters.
But we have a cadence to what we do, right? And the listeners begin to really settle into that cadence. They know what's coming. People love predictability. People love to know what they're going to get. And so if you can be consistent without being boring, like you don't want to drive it in, but it's the idea of traffic and weather on the 9s, right? People know what's coming up. And so I think you have to have this wide variety with this amazing consistency. And that sounds like an oxymoron, but you have to be able to do both in your podcast. And so every mid-show, we bring up our awesome subscribers and we say, hey, thank you for joining us here. And so folks listening know to expect, hey, in the mid-show, that's when I'm going to get announced.
That's right. You're going to get your awesome supporters, and we're talking about, also, if you want some one-on-one consulting, you can be the teacher's pet. And this is all over at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. But we always thank our $20 supporters, awesome people like Josh Liston over at tipsoftheslung.com. He's a new kind of spiritual leader and career coach. Kim Craggy over at Toastmasters101.net. Carl White at lifeinthecarolinaspodcast.com. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. Greg at Debt Shepherd, where he teaches financial wellness. Find him at debtshepherd.com. Glenn the Geek, I mentioned him earlier. Hebert, find him in all of his whatever 18 other shows over at Horse Radio Network. If you have a horse, you got to check that out. Shane, we mentioned him earlier at spybrary.com. And Ed Sullivan at soniccupcake.com. He's an audio editor if you need help with that. And again, if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, simply go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. It is deeply appreciated. It's one of those things where at first I didn't think COVID really did much for the school. I lost a few at the beginning and then did it, but there's a little, like I was doing wrapping up July last month and I'm like, hey, look, things are hopefully coming back up, but there was definitely a
I didn't see any drop in Patreon in mine.
Yeah,
no, I don't have a ton. So, but I didn't see, and okay, here's another, my audience is a bunch of information, tech workers. Like I cater towards the technology system admin or, that kind of audience. And many of them didn't lose their jobs, right? We're in pretty good shape from a job perspective. So my audience probably they're working from home. They're still getting paid, right? They still have a job. So maybe that's a good example of where my Patreon didn't move. In fact, it went up a little bit during the pandemic.
Yeah, we just had two, right? We had Josh and we had Ken, the AP professor. So that is now bringing it back up to kind of where it was. At one point, we're over three.
Show.
Yeah, for this show. Yeah. But in the School of Podcasting didn't change a whole lot. But then all of a sudden, boy, at the end of July, everybody was like, And, that's because from what I understand, some of the programs.
Unemployment benefits drop.
Yeah, things started to drop and people are like, yeah. So if you've been thinking of being an awesome supporter, now would be a great time.
Well, but first of all, let's just say this: if you've been on unemployment and receiving here in the United States and receiving that extra benefits and it's going away, we don't know how this is going to play out. Yeah. We're sorry for that, and of course, you don't have to support this show during those times.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't put Ask the Podcast Coach on a credit card. That is a bad bad idea.
We want you to be financially sound in doing this, so make sure you're making the right financial decisions.
Yeah. Here is another question from Facebook. Are there any podcast creators specializing or interested in entertainment, movie, TV, or comic book news here, wanting to connect and help each other grow? And I put this as finding a co-host, but I don't think that's what this person's actually looking for. But anytime I see these, are there any podcast creators specializing or interested in entertainment, movie, TV, or comic book news? You know what we should do, Jim? We could make a lot of money with this. If we could make like a search tool that would search the entire internet.
Man, that's brilliant, Dave.
That would be cool, wouldn't it?
How the whole internet, like everything on the internet,
just have like little robots that go out and just constantly searching for new content,
crawling, and that would be.
And then somebody could go like, comic book news, and then anything that was like about Batman or Superman or whatever. Like they could have results show right up there in the, I don't know.
You've gone too far.
Do you think that would work?
Too much. You're asking, can't be done. It's too big. Can't be done. Can't just, and imagine if you could just get on your computer and use it whenever you wanted.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm going to the library.
Hey, mine are finally back open. Yay! Here's another one. I labeled this scared. Let's see here. Hey, everyone. Over the past year, I've been toying with the idea of starting a podcast. However, I continually talk myself out of it. I say to myself, that's a great idea for a show, but you're going to run out of content. And or you say, what if I say something unknowingly ignorant and then people cancel me? Or that show has already been done before, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also a bit intimidated by all that is involved with starting up, as I would be starting with minimal equipment, and I'm not quite sure where to begin. Anyway, my biggest hurdle are my self-doubts. Did anyone else experience anything similar when getting into podcasting? I appreciate any advice you may have. And I did not get the person's name on this, so my apologies for that. But that was in some Facebook group, and I was like, I bet other people are feeling that way.
Yeah. Here's my answers. Yes, and yes. Like I've had all those feelings, and I still have all those feelings. Like we at Gallup, we produce a bunch of podcasts every week. Like we do a lot of material out there now, and I have primary responsibility to kind of make sure they all happen. And I'm the host on a couple of them. And it every day before I get ready to do one, I'm like, should I be doing this? Like, is this, should I do this? And so those doubts are just part of being human. You just have them. You just got to push through and say, yeah, I should be, because I'm here and nobody else is. And so I'm going to do this today.
If you think about anything you've ever done for the first time, and I don't know why, when I was just now thinking about this, I remember the first time I was pulled on an inner tube behind a boat, and you're just kind of like, okay, so he's going to start it and I'm going to hold on to these handles for your dear life. That was basically the instructions you get. And then you're flipping and flopping and, and you just, like, okay, the goal here is to not die.
Yeah. And
you don't know, and you do it. And you're kind of, when he starts to pull away and you're waiting for that rope to yank, you're just like, okay. And you're nervous. So anytime you do anything, I think the first time, and I was listening to Jordan Harbinger's show, creatively named the Jordan Harbinger Show, and he did a whole deep dive on imposter syndrome. And he said it's actually kind of a good thing, because if you're doing something new, that means you're kind of growing in some way. And anytime you do anything new, it's you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, and that's how you grow. Yeah. I don't know that I'm worried that much about the cancel culture. I don't really talk about anything that controversial. I mean, the thing that podcasters love to talk about is Joe Rogan a podcast or not. I'm like, really? That's what we're gonna. Well, there's no RSS feed. Okay, yeah, let's spend another 3 hours arguing about that.
Who cares? He's having massive impact.
Yeah, I can't imagine in the chat room, Fred Castaneda. How about jumping out of a plane in flight and your parachute malfunctioned? Right. No. Well, just jumping out of a first of all, getting in a plane.
Right.
I can't, when I see movies or whatever, and they're whatever 15,000 feet up. I have no idea. I'm pulling that right out of my butt. And they open up the door and they just take this shot. I mean, I have I'm afraid of heights anyway, and it's hilarious. There are times if I'm at, the other day I was riding on the Ohio Erie Canal, is where they now have a bike path, and they have the locks there, which are very, very tall, and you can stand right on the edge. And if you fall in, you're going to get hurt a lot. And just looking over the edge, like there was a part where my whole body kind of went for like a millisecond, went kind of numb, like, so.
And then you jumped, right?
Yeah. And
then I jumped. The analogy broke down. Oops, it broke down. I think that nervous energy is good. Like I've done 1,000 podcasts, and I am still nervous I get a little nervous before this show on Saturday mornings. I connect with you at 9:15 my time. 9:15, we have 15 minutes kind of chat, and that kind of helps me connect with you and settle me down a little bit. But at 9:00, I'm a little nervous. And I think that nervous energy, now it's not debilitating nerves, but it's an energy you got to fuel, or you got to turn that nervous energy into focus to be your very best. And so use that. Like if you're feeling like in this question that we just had, if you have these doubts, use these doubts to fuel your excellence. Like don't turn them into running away, turning them into running forward, and run into it with it and be excellent in it. I think some of those people who have the biggest doubts are probably are better at this than anybody. They just need to get out there and get it done.
Well,
And
and
so,
if you're doing something that's really brand new, like if you're taking a podcast into a format that nobody's ever thought of, that's where you go, ooh, boy, there's nothing even to base this on. It's brand new. That's where it gets, on one hand, I have nothing to base this on. But on the other hand, because nobody else is doing that, people either are going to love it or hate it. So it'll be kind of interesting. And I'm with you. I still get, people think it's funny when I love to talk on stage. That was my career for a while. I was basically talking to a classroom, but it was still live in front of people. And when I talk at events, 5 minutes like clockwork before I go on, I lose all the blood in my hands. My hands get ridiculously cold. And I look at them like, oh, cool. And I look at my watch and I'm like, yep, 5 minutes. And to me, that's just a sign that this is good, because there's always going to be somebody in that audience that has not seen me speak. And I'm like, cool, fresh meat. Let's go out and make a great first impression. And
yeah.
Dave,
one of my favorite things on speaking in person with large crowds, and the bigger the crowd, the more comfortable I am, but is to get out on stage, make eye contact with somebody right away and smile. Like, that puts you in the zone, at least for me, puts me in the zone so quickly. Like to step out there, you're like, and just to kind of sense that they're here and they're with me. And when I smile and they smile back, boom, game on. Let's do this thing. And so I love that first. It's such a rush. It's such a good feeling too, of walking out when you're speaking to a group. That first minute when you look out into the crowd and you make eye contact, man, that's addicting to me. I really like doing that. I get to do that at our church. I do the announcements, the welcome and announcements, the little 1 minute thing in the beginning and the end. And that has just been such a helpful thing to me, to step out and make sure I make eye contact. Now, sometimes the lights are down and it's hard to see. Have you been on a platform where they've got more lights coming this way and you can't see the audience? That's freaking scary. Yeah. Like, if I can't see eyes, I get super nervous, because I'm like, am I landing? Are people looking at me? What are they doing? Are they sleeping? So I like to be able to see them for sure.
A couple other things you said here. I might run out of content. Okay, let's worry about that when it happens.
Yeah.
And if nothing else,
go back and do it again.
Yeah. Then either go
back and do it again.
Yeah. Chances are you might come up, the more you dig into your niche, you might find more things. You might get some feedback from people. And if you run out of content, then you go, all right, first podcast done. What's my next podcast going to be about? It's really not the end of the world. I don't think people are going to go, well, that was a failure. He only did 7 episodes. Well, you did more than the person that's still thinking about it.
I think it's kind of cool. Before we move on, I think it's kind of cool that I got a note on Friday at like 4:30. Yesterday at 4:30. Lots happened. I had 7 hours of Man in the High Castle in between there and here, so it feels like a whole day. And I got a note from one of the guys who says, hey, we want to start a new podcast. What do you need? And internally at work. And I was like, oh, cool. Tell me about it. Give me some, send me a title and some descriptions. Let's work through it. And it's just kind of fun to see new ideas, inside the company, kind of flourish on their own. I didn't have to go out and beg somebody, or I didn't have to do a seminar internally at work to be like, here's how you start a podcast. We've done enough of them now that somebody's like, this should be a podcast and we're going to do this. And they just started moving on with it. And so, we'll see if it makes it all the way to full production. The gal who's starting it has partnered with me on another podcast before. So I think it's got a good chance. But it was fun, Dave, to see a podcast born. Like, you're like, oh, wow, okay. Because they don't happen. This doesn't happen every day, right? We get maybe one a year if we're lucky, or every other year to get it to that point. But it's fun to be, I don't know, I guess to be the grandfather of some of these at Gallup, right? To see the kids have kids and be like, oh, this is awesome. Yes, let's do this thing. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah,
it's and I had this as a question of the month. I don't remember how many months ago, but like, what's the worst thing that happened because you started a podcast? And there really weren't that many. It was like, well, I watch less TV. Oh, I don't do this, I don't do that. But nobody was like, oh, it ruined my life, I started this and blah, blah, blah. And I think you're going to come out on the other side, if nothing else, you'll have a great story, and you can say, yeah, I did that, I tried it, as opposed to the tons of people who don't, that just think about it and then they wonder.
It's not for everybody, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are some folks who get in there and find like, nah, this isn't really for me, and that's okay too.
Yeah,
jumping in, jumping out, that's fine. That works too.
It's the only way you're going to know is this for me, is to try it. And I think everybody feels that if I start a podcast, it is like you're in front of a giant group of 10,000 people, and you're in front of a giant group of 10, like 10, when you first start out, and it's 10 people that you'll never meet probably, unless it's your family, because you told them, it's not a huge number. And so you've got plenty of time to get ramped up and go that way.
Even
so
if you do, and it's a massive blowout, learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Awesome.
Just do it. You and I both have plenty of podcasts that have fallen by the wayside, that have gotten started and then fallen by the wayside. Right. And for whatever reasons, they haven't worked. We've all tried different formats. In fact, this show, right, that's showing on my screen right now, Home Tech Tips, was one born out of Home Tech, which was now Home Gadget Geeks. And the idea was I was going to pull little 5-minute segments out of Home Tech to have these Home Tech tips, because I have guests that give these tips. What I found out is the work to do that is enormous. To go in there and find those and edit them and post them to their own channel and such. And I don't know, I maybe did 30 of those, 35. And I quit. I was just like, I'm not, this is too much work. Well, the video on my YouTube channel that has the most views ever is one of these Home Tech tips. And you just don't know. Does that mean I go back and start it again? No, because I don't really have the time to go in and edit, pull all those things out. But I do have the, it was an idea. It didn't work in its time. It may come back again. You just got to keep trying. You got to keep innovating.
Yeah. Brett in the chat room says fail. That's first attempt in learning. FAIL, first attempt in learning. So that's it. And that's where I talked about this in the last episode of the School of Podcasting. There's a difference between a mistake and failure. A mistake is when you kind of know how something should go and you get a different response than what was expected, where failure is like you try something you don't know what to expect and you get a response and go, oh, well, that's different than I thought. It's like, it's not, it's not the end of the world. So yeah.
Can you imagine if 15 years ago or 20 years ago, a couple home brewers who got together to brew beer, and they were like, hey, we ought to think about selling this. and the other guy went, nah, Budweiser has already, it's already been done. They've already got the market. I mean, what we would have missed in that space had home brewing, which turned into microbrews, which have turned into, now they're owned by some of those big companies, but the diversity of flavor and consistency and type, because someone took a chance and said, yeah, I think I'm going to try this thing. And so podcasting has the same diversity, which, because it's an open platform, I really appreciate. Anybody can do anything. Dave, I've been super impressed with Ray. I know we're running up against the bottom of the hour here, but Ray on Podcasters Roundtable. And, during this pandemic and during kind of the crisis we've been having here in the United States, Ray just kind of flat out said, you know what? We're not diverse enough. Podcasters Roundtable, not diverse enough. 3 white guys, like we're getting mostly white guys as guests. We need to diversify. And I've been super proud of Ray that over the last couple shows, he has really worked hard to diversify that out. And good for him. So we need to be doing that in our podcasts, as well as podcasting allows for diversity. There aren't a lot of things. I shouldn't say nothing, because you still have to buy some equipment. You still have to have a space to do this, and you still have to have access to the internet. So there are some things that can stop it. But man, I really do appreciate the diversity in this. And I wouldn't want anyone, just because they didn't think they could, to not, because it allows for diversity. And so we all need to keep striving for that. This didn't end we made a big deal of it a couple months ago, and then it's like, well, let's get back to normal. No, we can't waste that opportunity. We need to continue to encourage diversity in the podcasting space going forward.
Well, that's the beauty of it, is it's your content. You can change it into, whatever you want. Randall in the chat room says, failure is feedback, and feedback is the breakfast of champions. I like that. And it's and the thing I liked about Ray was when all this stuff first went down and, everybody was talking about race 24/7, Ray just went, we're not doing a show. Like, this is not the time to like, hey, let's talk about microphones and Apple and Spotify. He's like, no, he goes, let's, I don't want to do anything. He goes, as much as people might say people need an escape, he's like, no, we're going to, like, we're not putting out anything that's going to distract from the conversation that needs to be going on. He's like, so he goes, I just don't feel like it. And I was like, it's your show.
Smart call. I knew a few podcasters that did that, a few white podcasters that just like, it's not our time. There's more important things going on right now. Let's let those voices be heard. And I think that was a super smart call. I also think we're missing the boat if we don't look, and it kind of depends on your podcast, but let me just say this, do an inventory and kind of look at the diversity that you have in what you're doing. Certainly if you're a solo podcast, okay, maybe there's some limitations there. But I did inventories both on my own and at work and kind of went, okay, I've got to work harder to make sure I'm representing a wider field of diversity in this. And it's not just going to happen by itself. Right. Like, I'm going to have to take some intentional measures. I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to be different. I'm going to have to get out of my comfort zone and invite some guests. In my case, invite some guests of color on my program to do those things. That doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but certainly we can't let this get away from us. And by the way, not just a problem in the United States. So yeah, we have a big problem here, and it's being highlighted today. But I think, I always say this, where two or more are gathered, there is conflict. And so, like, we always have opportunities to bring in differing opinions and differing thoughts on our podcast.
Well, and it goes back. I remember when I was reading, Kristen Meisner has a book, So You Think You Want to Start a Podcast. And she talks about how if you are looking for a co-host, if only somebody would build this search engine thing we were talking about, where you could put in like, let's say I'm doing a show on, basket weaving. Why not put in basket weaving expert or African-American basket weaving expert? She goes, that's how you find them, Asian basket weaving expert or whatever, and as for, saying something ignorant that you didn't realize was ignorant. I've asked this question in 3 different settings and they have all said the same thing. Because they're listening to your podcast, they kind of get to know your heart, and you not so much you're going to get a pass, but you're not going to get canceled. You're going to have somebody who goes, hey, Dave, I don't know if you realize this, but when you say blah, 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 that's not really the right phrase anymore. You should probably do such and such in the future. And then you go, oh, wow, I did not know that. And obviously you didn't know it, because if you knew it, you wouldn't say it, because, well, they know your heart. And so I know I've worried about that a lot. I'm like, I don't know what I don't know. And they're like, yeah, we know you don't know what you don't know. And we'll be happy to educate you. But that also goes back to, I spent a month watching, you name it. 13th, I think, is my favorite one. They just go, oh. And then, like I said, there's one, Seeing White. It's a podcast that's looking at history specific. And that's the one I was just like, wait, they did what?
Yeah. No, it's good, like, good to educate on that.
Amazing stuff.
Dave, before we go out, let me just say one more thing on that. By the way, if you're listening to someone and you're offended by what they say, they may not be aware of what, like, it depends, right. But especially on these cultural differences, and especially in the area of language, like when you say pants in the UK, it means something completely different than when you say pants here in the United States. That goes both ways. Be gracious with people in that, like, just tell them, nicely, and maybe not in public, like in a chat room. Yeah. Like, maybe just send them a note privately. Like, we correct it privately and we praise publicly. Just follow some rules and don't be a douche. So there you go. Let's end it on that.
It's a new t-shirt. Don't be a douche. There you go. Yeah, it's well, first of all, thanks to the chat room today. Stick around. I have a fun story. Jim, you're talking about saying things in church.
Yeah.
We're going to take a 10-second tangent of something I did that it was the minute the service was over, my phone rang of people just laughing because they're like, I can't believe you just said that.
I got one too. I'll follow up with it too. I got one exactly like that.
Yeah. So stick around for the post show for that. Of course, if you are an awesome supporter, askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. You get access to all of our bonus material. We are here every Saturday at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Jim, what's coming up on the averageguy.tv?
Yeah, so no tech this week, but my daughter Sammy came on the program, talked about a summer of a pandemic living with her dad, which is super interesting. So I already have gotten tons of positive feedback from the community on that. I don't know what we did, but we were just transparent in the way we talked. I'll be posting that a little bit later this weekend, the averageguy.tv.
Nice. And on this week's show, talk about shows that make you nervous. I'm throwing myself under the bus on the School of Podcasting and explaining a mistake I made and how I made it. So stick around for some post show. So for whatever reason, I am now. If it wasn't for me, I don't know what would have happened to my church. Oh, Bangs is coming on here. Let's do Bangs and then we'll do. Yeah.
I need to fill up. All right, bring him on,
Mr. Naughty Bits.
Bring him on. Just know there's a 85% probability that we'll boot him.
That seems to be his goal at this point.
So. I think
I have never deliberately attempted to be kicked from any show.
Well, good. So maybe it's down to 50%.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're drinking coffee is a good sign.
Good.
Yeah. Good. What's going on?
Did you hear about the court ruling in San Francisco regarding Patreon?
No.
Ooh, did not.
Okay, this has been going on for weeks. They finally had the actual ruling come out last week. Nobody's heard of it, and it's interesting. And in theory, it could destroy Patreon. Probably won't, but could. Patreon sued a number of its former clients, former patrons, not necessarily the people who received the money from Patreon, but the people who paid money to people on Patreon. This was over a gentleman who got booted from Patreon for cause. His rabid fans all applied for arbitration. In California, if you are going for arbitration, according to the terms of service, you have to pay $250 in fees, but the company in question has to pay upfront the remainder of the costs. So 100 people applied for arbitration that they were being interfered with trying to get money from point A to point B. The effective cost of each arbitration would cost Patreon between $2,500 and $10,000, somewhere in that range. So
interesting.
So they are, in theory, when this goes forward, going to be paying the arbitrators and hence the lawyers at the arbitration company a large sum of money. How much? Yeah, who knows? I'm hand waving at the moment. But there are tons of other people who can, in theory, bring thousands of people under this law to bring, and it would effectively bring down Patreon, as suddenly there are millions of dollars of outstanding legal fees that, according to California law, they have to pay out front. That's the backstory. The hearing was regarding Patreon changing the terms of service so that they couldn't do this. Under the old terms of service, you were not allowed to be in a class action lawsuit against Patreon, period. That was in the terms of service. You had to go through arbitration in California. You were required, absolutely. You couldn't get around that if you wanted to go and file some sort of claim against Patreon. So these people filed in California individually since they couldn't be a class. Patreon changed their terms of service as they were filing to prevent them from doing exactly that, and filed lawsuits against all these people for using the terms of service they agreed to at the time. These are people who have not agreed to any updated terms of service at this point. They haven't logged into their accounts. They canceled the account at the time. The judge ruled, one, you can't change the terms of service in the middle of the thing just because it affects you. A, and B, you can't go after people for following your own terms of service this way, and threw Patreon's suit against its former customers out completely.
I'm surprised the judge, like, isn't Patreon just going, we're not in the way of you paying this person?
No. This has that's nothing to do with the judge. That's what's being arbitrated. This is about whether they could get to arbitration. The judge has no say in the arbitration.
It just seems weird that, like, common sense says we're not in the way of you paying so-and-so. They don't live here anymore. They're over there.
That's for the arbitrators to decide. And I'm not saying one way or the other whether they should go forward with this. I'm not a fan of people going to courts or, in this case, arbitration. But they tried to change the rules in the middle of the game, the judge smacked them down rather hard.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So Bangs, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How do you follow all this stuff? Like, you have the most, you follow at the most minuscule detail on some of these things, on the deepest of rabbit trails like this on this. How do you follow one? How do you keep up with it all? Because every week you have 3 or 4
when I go for
these kinds of things. Like, how do you keep up
when
with
I go
this?
4?
Say it again.
I get kicked when I go to 4. I've determined that's a pattern.
Oh, well, that's
3
true.
is pushing it.
That's true. But I see you mention them in the chat room sometimes too. How do you follow all this stuff? I mean, I don't even have enough time to keep up with the regular news, much less this depth of an understanding of this. What do you follow? Where do you do this?
It's just in the background radiation.
No. I'm asking a serious question. How do you keep track of this? Like, what do you read to stay up on all this stuff?
Well, I get
is it
I get a little bit of stuff to come in through Reddit, but not much. I'm usually the person who posts this. I just listen to what's going on. I subscribe to the New York Times, the Post.
Nobody's writing about this. Like, who writes
this
about
particular
this
story is only found on the right-wing political side of things. Nobody in the center or mainstream media is talking about this literally. But if you follow anybody in the center right of value, they may have mentioned it in passing of recent.
And then, like, to keep track of it, same news outlets, or do you have access to? I mean, how do you get at that level of detail? It's impressive. Like, the amount of detail you have on these things is impressive.
I'm surface level, unfortunately. You know, if somebody actually asked me about the court decision, although I posted the actual decision on Reddit, it means nothing to me. It's legal gobbledygook. I have to listen to other people interpret it.
Sure. Do you podcast about any of this stuff?
Oh, would I podcast about podcasting?
No.
That's saturated. Who would listen to a podcast about podcasting?
Well, no, listen, nobody is talking about what you just talked about. Like, nobody. There's nobody talking about that.
That's true.
So, like, why would you not? I mean, listen, we are high level. We talk about microphones and quitting and pod fading and those kinds of things. That's high level. Like, this is minutia, right? This is the minutia on minutia.
This is minutia that's going.
Why don't you podcast? But why don't you podcast about that?
Why would I?
Because people would listen, apparently, maybe.
Yeah,
I'd rather let you podcast about it.
No, we're not interested in it. That's why you get booted. Like, we're not, like, we don't want to go to that kind of minutia. Like, that a lot of folks are like, that's too deep for me. But you've got a group on Reddit that works in that stuff that may be interested in that. Why are you not podcasting about it?
Oh, I have enough podcasts as it stands right now.
There you go. That's fair enough. I mean, the reason I listen to Bandrew is because Bandrew talks about YouTube news, and I can't get that from Daniel J. Lewis and SP and everybody else. He's because he's a YouTuber basically that does podcasting, and it's different information. So, that would be something that all these kind of fringe stories that you're like, I didn't even know that was going on. I mean, that's why I listen to No Agenda. That's why I listen to Congressional Dish. It's all this stuff that should be in the mainstream. And in this case, is it mainstream stuff? But it's kind of mainstream for maybe people in media creation. Before we all go throwing our eggs in the Patreon basket. We might want to see if they're gonna, because they did lay off a bunch of people in the middle of the pandemic.
Well, last year they the CEO Jack Conte, anyway, came out and said he didn't have a viable business model and he was going back to the investors for more money. So that's an interesting way to go, asking the investors for more money.
Yeah, that's weird.
You know, it's odd. They're just a middleman. You have a computer, take 5% off and pass the money through, one would think. How can you lose money that way?
Infrastructure.
Yeah, that's where you go. How many middlemen are in there?
Cheap. You know, you got to house all that stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
All right.
But that's going to reach into the pockets of a whole lot of people if something goes south.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's a few alternatives to it. If it were to bail, there's a few out there that
Subscribe Star and a few others come to mind.
Well, there's some backups.
There's a reason why it's askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and not patreon.com/Dave Jackson, because I always know, you know, and if for some reason they go down the tubes, I just redirect /awesome and presto, I'm back in business.
Sounds good.
So awesome.
One other quick thing. Very quick.
Go.
Number 2, so I won't get booted for this. Cheap, good, decent gear is amazingly expensive right now. If you want anything, I just tried to go through and help somebody, and everything I would possibly recommend starts at $400 that you can actually get your hands on for a small group now. You can't get the Behringer mixers at a reasonable price, if at all. You can't get the UMC 404, you know, beautiful device at $100. Then it went up to $150. Then it went to $180. Now you can't get it.
Yeah. I did see where B&H has, at least yesterday. Yeah, they had the Q2U yesterday, and I was like, yes, finally. So interesting. But
it stock for 2 weeks.
Yeah. So
I think it'll change though. You know, everything the ship will right. If you're trying to buy now, it's a bad time to buy because everybody, like the number of calls that I got from people during the pandemic,
how can I sound good on my Zoom call?
Totally. Yeah. And that's happening exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I've been expecting the used gear market to go crazy, but it hasn't yet.
No, everybody's holding on to their stuff.
I'm getting ready to do a garage sale. It dawned on me as I'm getting ready to move.
Now would be the time, my friends.
I'm like, I've got it, because here's the problem. I have an H6 in the box, never been opened, and I was like, they just came out with the H8. That's just going to lose money the longer it sits in my closet.
Now is the time. Yeah,
interesting.
And I think it'll correct. What we'll be lucky is if the companies overcorrect and then flood the market, and then of course that'll drive prices down when people stop buying and there's more in the market. So today's not the best day to buy gear. Like this is not what you want to be purchasing right now. I have been following a lot of Slick Deal links. Like I tripled my Slick Deals on things that I've been watching, non-tech related, not podcast related. And man, like tools right now, you can get some pretty good deals on tools, and I bought a generator at half price and some of those kinds of things. Because for a while, retail was getting pounded. Nobody was buying anything. And so they were dropping prices to try and encourage folks to come in. Now, it took Lowe's twice to send me generators without breaking them. And the second time, they broke both of them. So you got to be really careful what you have shipped. UPS is not good at shipping 100-pound things at this point. But I think Bangs, you got to watch your... You gotta kind of watch what's going on in the market and be looking for things that people aren't looking for right now. And so today is not a good day to have microphone envy.
No,
just stick with what you have.
Yeah. It's a great time if you want over $400 for anything.
Right, exactly.
Or if you're selling something.
The Zoom L8s and the Roadcasters are reasonably friendly in stock, and they're not going up in prices. But if you're looking for anything decent and cheap,
yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Right
Good enough.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, Banks. Thanks for jumping in, man. See ya.
See ya.
I love his self-awareness around the boot now. That's pretty great.
That's it. Well, I was ready. I was like, well, if all else fails, I could always just play my Howard Stern clip.
I don't know, man. I can't take it anymore.
And, so
Jim Rome would just have that sound what he would do.
Yeah.
Super good.
Or of course, Jim's favorite. the goat scream.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Here's another good question. Which host characteristics you think might bring more engagement with the audience? Being distant, unreachable, so people try to come closer, or being open, friendly, so the audience feels rich?
Reached. Yeah.
Reached. Yeah. What do you think? Taylor Swift or Prince?
Be yourself.
Yeah.
You can't fake it. Like, you can't fake those kinds of things very long. And you're either one or the other.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not good at distant. Like, I want to be, I want to be out there with people doing that, interacting with them. If you're hoping to do it for any length of time, soar with your strengths. If you're good at that, of being out there with people, do it that way. If you're introverted and quiet and you want to produce content but be left alone, do it that way.
A great example of that is the band Rush. The guitar player and the bass player, so Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, very open, friendly guys. Their drummer, Neil Peart, ridiculous introvert. Mm-hmm. And you might get him on an interview show if he wrote a book. But the whole meet the band, greet the thing, and they just said, look, Neil's not a jerk. That's just not his thing. Like, right. It's just not he's not comfortable doing it. And that whole 9 yards. Jim, you want to go with your fun talk first, or shall I go first?
Why don't you go first? You go first.
So I'm doing this thing on Zoom for my church. So these are older people. They're all dialing in on the phone. I'm not sharing a screen on anything, but for whatever reason, they've decided, because I have the microphone, I guess, that I will read the scripture. So pastor is like, da-da-da. And there's the story of Jesus says to turn and put your nets into the water. And I said nuts. Turn and put your nuts into the water. And what was funny is I didn't even notice it until I got to the next line. And I just went, hold on, let's do that one again. Mm-hmm. And Jesus turned and said, put your nets.
Snickering?
Yeah.
Were people snickering?
Because everybody's muted.
Yeah. Oh, right.
So it was just me. Okay. And I had no idea. And I just went, let's do that again. Jesus turned and said, put your nets into the water. And I just pretended like it didn't happen, and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, the minute the service was over, my phone rings and it's the church secretary just crying. She's laughing so hard. So anyway, what was yours?
Actually, at the end of the show, when I used the D word, I won't mention it here, but Ken reminded me, that does offend some people, and so you got to be careful with some of those words, right?
Really? Because I love that one. That's a fun.
Oh, me too. But it's not. Well, you're never going to be 100% offensive free. Like, it's just not going to happen. You're going to say something that's going to offend somebody. You just have to apologize. So if you're listening and the D word offended you, I apologize. That's why I'm not using it again. And if you're like D word, then you weren't offended. Okay.
It rhymes with schmoosh.
So I was up in front of a group I went to a Christian college, Christian liberal arts college, and I was up in front of an audience, and I used the word I said, sometimes this world really sucks. And that's not a term that I'm a California kid. We use that all the time. This place sucks. This is but conservative Midwestern, folks that are attracted to this kind of university that I went to, not so good with that word. Right? Oh, so the dean of the college pulled me aside, which is really, really great, right? You correct in private and admonish or praise in public, right? And so he pulls me aside and says, "You're going to have to apologize." And it's like, what? I'm like trying to think, did I swear up there? Like, did I not? As a military guy, so I can swear like a sailor, right? And did I let one slip out? So I said, "What did I say?" He said the S word, and I was like, "So the other S word." I was going through it, and then he goes, "No," and he could barely say it himself. Like, he said, "It sucks," and I'm like, and I just my heart just fell. Like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, you're right. Now, I could have fought that. Like, that could have been one of those things where you fight it. And you're like, no, that's not a, you're right. So the next segment, I went up and apologized. I didn't say what for, though. I didn't say what for. And I had people coming to me afterwards saying, what did you say? Yeah. After that, people listened to me a little more carefully.
When I was a pastor in training, I kind of did basically a podcast. I would have my bullet points. I'd have anything I had to read set up, but pretty much it was like, here's a bullet point, and I would just riff. And I was really comfortable at it, having fun, making people laugh, but yet getting them to think, and didn't even realize until I got to the end. And they didn't make me apologize. They're like, hey, you do know you said the word crap today, right?
Oh.
And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you said something, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's just a bunch of crap. And I was like, I don't remember saying that. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, just might want to think about that. And then the one I did purposely as a joke to push a button, because there's a story where a guy beats people with the jawbone of an ass.
Yeah.
I forget the guy's name.
Samson is his name.
Samson, yeah. And I said, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And he beat people with a piece of ass. And I just so I could say the phrase piece of ass. And I said it, and it was like, come on, it's the only time I can say it and get away with it. And they all kind of laughed because they knew. They're like, okay, I get it. So it was
it's appropriate. It's a good story.
Yeah, that was me like, hey, I can say something wrong here and it's not wrong.
Technically, you're right.
It's the old George Carlin joke. Cock's in the Bible. The cock code 3, the cock's in the Bible. Because people's like, you can't use words that aren't in the Bible. It's like, oh, so George
There's
Carlin.
always got to be somebody who pushes it.
Yeah. I saw a comedian. Who was I watching? Oh, I wish I could remember. It was such a great thing. Because he said there's a group of people that make me so mad. It might have been Jim Gaffigan, because I remember thinking I didn't expect him to get kind of serious. And he said, the people that make me, no, it was Brad, because he's a little person. Snack Size is the name of the show, Brad Williams. And he talked about how the people that he goes, if you want to get me mad, he goes, be offended for me. He goes, the people that get offended for other people. Like, so if it's somebody who's, right now they're talking about changing the name of the Cleveland Indians. And if it's a middle-aged white person going, look, I am offended by this name. And it's like, well, you're not a Native American. And he's like, look, it's like he goes, you realize how demeaning that is? It's like, look, Native American people, I got this for you. Like, you just sit here. I'm going to go take care of this for you. He goes, you realize how demeaning that is? Like, I'm offended for you. And I was like, wow, that's a really good point. So
yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think it's really hard not to offend sometimes. And, and I think the key right now, you're going to do it, is just apologize. If somebody calls you on it, go, you're right. You know what? Yeah. You're right. My bad. I will try not to do that in the future. Cause that's all you can do. Right. When you have those moments, is just say, yeah, no, you're right. And I think sometimes just stop talking about it. Just like,
that's it. Okay, just let it go.
We have no, like, to your point, we have no business talking about that sometimes. Like, it's not our thing. Certainly supporting it. And when we have seen things, especially groups of people or whatever done wrong, supporting that, being in favor of it, helping them, those kinds of things. But sometimes just being quiet in not trying to, well, I should just stop.
Well, here's a tip from just so you know, half the questions that we talked about today were actually questions from last week. So if you have a glut of content, instead of trying to squish those all into last week's episode, I don't know what we got on a talk about last week. I forget what it was, but I just was like, hey, this is where the chat room wants to go. We'll just go here. And off we go. And I was like, hey, those questions are good. I'll just use them next week. So anytime you find yourself with too much information, you will shoot yourself in the foot if you go, all right, normally I do a half-hour show. I'm going to do 50 minutes today and just give away all the information. Because the problem is the minute you put that out, you'll then go, oh, wait, I need another show next week or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, that's ugly.
Hey,
go ahead.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Or did you have something you wanted to?
I was gonna. Chris Nessie has been playing with a tool called Swell, and I was gonna put the link. I don't know. I found it, and it's was in my inbox, and they say they make it easier for podcasters to interact with their audience. It looks a little bit like the early versions of Anchor, where you would put up an audio and somebody would comment on the audio. Or Voxnest, or Voxer, if you've ever used that, that's like a walkie-talkie. And it was just one of those where they're like, hey, this is the new tool for podcasters. And I was like, I'm trying to figure out like what problem this solved. Because you have email, you have SpeakPipe, you have voicemail, I was like, and the only thing is it lets you hear what other people said. So if we said like if I did like the question of the month and use this, everybody, which kind of ruins my question of the month, everybody could hear everybody else's answers before I put them out publicly. So they showed an example of somebody commenting on a school system going back to school in person. And then you had all these people like, I think that's not going to work and blah, blah, blah. And then somebody else would be like, mask, mask, mask. And then the next person would be like, masks are stupid. And then the next person was like, my kid's not going to keep a mask. It was just going. And I was like, okay, I see what it does. I just wasn't sure, their whole thing. It's swell.life/podcasters is the domain. And if I go to that website, it was just one of those where I was like, I wasn't like poo-poo. I was just like, what does this do again? How is this, connect with your listeners and grow your audience? So it's kind of like, it's not a media host. You can put a widget on your website eventually. That doesn't exist yet. So I just hadn't played with it yet. And I don't know if Chris is still around, but I was hoping, I kept saying, hey, come in and chat on this. But it's new. It appears to be free. Is there anything? Voices of Swell. Introducing Voices of Swell. Celebrates the diversity of ideas. Okay. And then they have one for podcasters. So this is where I kind of go, it already looks like they're not sure maybe who their target audience is. I don't know. It's just
let me ask you a question on feedback, because this is what this is driven for. What do you think is worse? Feedback that is like 18th century, like the way the 18th century British people would treat each other, which is, in other words, they would cut each other down politely. Like, you would be having an argument and they would kind of passive aggressively hack on you, but they would do it politely, right? Or the way we do it today, which is just raw, get to the point. Like, what do you think? Which one of those do you think is worse? We got Chris. You think about that. You brought Chris in. Let's. Yeah. Chris, you don't have to answer that question, but
I only half heard the question. But how you guys doing?
Well, that's good. Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. So what is Swell? I'm not quite sure. I still follow. Besides, you put up a piece of audio and then people can put their audio on top of your audio, blah, blah, blah.
That's basically it. I've had it less than 24 hours. I had posted in the other Facebook group that it is what you said. It's like Anchor 1.0, where I put my thought out there in audio and then people can reply upon reply upon reply, and you get these threaded conversations. So what I did yesterday was I downloaded the app, I created my account, and I branded it with some of my podcast artwork. And I put out just like a little intro of what my podcast is about and who I would gear these for. And I ended it with a question. It was, less than a minute, and I got a little engagement, and, it might be something. I mean, I certainly see your point about, like with question of the month, it can kind of spoil if you're going to use it to generate content for your podcast.
Right.
But if you want to try and have another platform with another account where you can put out audio and kind of engage with people who might discover your content for the first time, it could be worth it. I mean, this platform, like Anchor, changed, but did we develop that soft skill of being able to put out short form audio to engage with people? I saw Bangs in the chat talk about, TikTok might get banned today. And I was on here a few months ago saying TikTok might be someplace we want to promote our podcast. Well, it might go away. But did we learn the soft skill of creating short form video stories for whatever that next platform is? So in less than 24 hours, I think this might be a good place to put out and say, here's what my podcast is about. Here's some, put some thoughts from my podcast out there and just try to engage with people. And the couple people who engaged with me said, oh, I'll go check out your podcast. Okay, cool. Maybe they know a teacher, maybe they are into technology and education, and it might be a way to connect with future and new listeners.
Do you have to have the app to reply?
Yeah, there's nothing web-based about it. So what you pulled up, that's how you interact. You can't log in on your desktop and interact with the software in any way. So it's all on the phone.
So it's just you're basically putting out to the Swell community and hoping that, and then I see it, and then if they like it, then. And I thought about that. The question of the month. So let's say 10 people answer the question of the month on that. That's a small portion of my audience that would quote get spoiled. So Brandon wants to know, do you think this would be something used for distance learning?
I think it could be used for threaded audio discussion.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I didn't see a way, and I'll pull it up here, which is great for video.
That's all right. I was going to ask, is there any way if you get an idiot in there that's like, I think they're all a bunch of blink, blink, blinkety, blink, blinks, and you're like, oh wait, hold on, like how do I get rid of Jethro because he's just spewing racist hate in my Swell.
On the profile on the app, I have what's public. Then I guess you can. There's a little lock icon, so it says record your first private Swell and invite who you'd like to join the conversation. So I guess if you have a way to do private, whatever this audio content, then you can control who gets access to it. So I guess for students, and I'd have to look closely at their terms of service to see if, I'm sure high school kids could use it for me or college kids, but if I get them on here and do private threaded conversation, that could work. But again, for me, and you mentioned Voxer, I use Voxer to do audio conversations with, college kids.
Yeah.
But maybe at the high school level, this could be something. And again, with something that's private, could be something.
Interesting. And it's free right now, right?
Of course. My favorite 4-letter F word.
Yeah, there we go. Any other insights?
That's all I have right now. I mean, I think it's
I'm going to say he's used it for a day.
I use it for a day. I mean, check it out. You can do relevant hashtags. So, for mine, with the House of Ed Tech, I called my first one House of Ed Tech Swell episode 1. So now when I search the hashtag Ed Tech in the app, mine's the only thing that comes up. So if you hit the relevant hashtags, you can be discovered.
That's an idea. Cool.
So that's all I got, guys.
Thanks, man.
Good to see you, man.
See you.
Happy hunting.
So it's 18th century
British. Remember how they were all polite? They would speak to each other politely, but they were just digging on each other from it. Like we would say, remember we'd say, "Good day, sir." That was kind of like that was like, giving them the finger. And then, or today where it is just no holds barred. You just say what you're feeling,
See, I'm weird. As much as it will pain me to hear it, I'm a guy that give me the brutal honesty. Don't sugarcoat it. So I know exactly where I stand. I'll take that quick, deep slice, but at least then I know how to move forward based on like, oh, you didn't tell me that. So
Craig says he still speaks that way.
Good day, sir.
Well, not him.
Oh.
He says some of us Brits. So
right.
He's Well, it's just it's
Bless
interesting because things get escalated so fast now in chat conversations. You can't even have a conversation because things like name calling and you're just, well, if you would just open your eyes or whatever. And it's a lot worse than that. And I go, what can we? We need to learn to
have a dialogue.
Yeah.
I want to find it. I was on YouTube. I'm with Jim. I'm watching a lot more YouTube these days, and it came up in the side, and I remember thinking I need to click on that. But it was Russell. Who's the English guy that looks like Jesus?
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. Russell Brand having a conversation with somebody I don't know, and the title of it was "This is how you have a discussion with opposing ideas" or something like that. And I was like, oh, because Russell Brand has some really, like, if you watch some of his, he did I think it was a documentary about drugs in England and just how, we kind of, if you're a heroin addict, it's really hard to get off that based on the bureaucracy. And so there's a thing where somewhere, wherever he was at, where they're like, look, rather than make these people go through withdrawal? What if we just make the drugs safe and cheap to use? Like, okay, it's not a great solution, but it's better than let's, let them use dirty needles and die and get, all sorts. It was a really interesting thing. So again, you've got a controversial subject, and he's just like, well, here's another way of doing it though. And it was just like, so it was just, and again, he made me think, and I was like, oh, all right, I never thought of it that way. So
I think that's you've got to, at some point, you've got to stop and go, like, yeah, let me think on that some.
Yeah.
And I've had a summer we spent when my daughter was on Thursday talking on Gadget Geeks. I think for me, this has been I've thought more about issues this summer because she challenges me all the time on stuff. And
is that fun?
Yeah, it is, now that I know not to fight back, or not to,
tell her she's wrong, but
well, sometimes I tell her she's wrong, or hey, this is the way I think about it.
Right.
We've had some really, she's 21 and idealistic, and and you kind of want to go. I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. And in the 52 years I've been on the planet, I've seen a few things, but we'd have these great conversations, and at first not as good as now. Now I know, like, okay, just breathe into this thing. It's going to be okay. Let's have a conversation. Why do you think? Tell me more. But that takes practice. I think we online, we miss all that sometimes by take a deep breath. Think about it before you respond, and then let's be. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but you don't have to be.
That's it.
Yeah, just have some dialogue on it. Like, I think we have to change that person's mind, and they have to change it right now, and they're not gonna. And especially the way we fight online, it's so stupid.
That was
so stupid.
One of the major stumbling blocks of my second marriage. Is I kept telling my wife, I don't need you to agree with me, but I do need to be heard. Yeah. And it was like, and to her, she could not separate the two. She's like, but that's not the, I'm like, no, I'm not asking you to change your mind. I just I've heard you out. I got your point. I see where you're coming from. Can we do that for me now? She's like, yeah, but that's wrong. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And then you understand that, okay, she can't do that, but it's just, it is having a dialogue is not.
Well, I think we've been taught, or we feel like if it's not the way we think it is right now, everything's going to crap.
Right.
Hell, whatever we're going to say, whatever I can say, not offend somebody.
HE double hockey stick.
In most cases, that's not it. The world's not going to end. Sun's going to go down. It's going to come up. It'll be tomorrow. And we just feel like, no, this has to be resolved right now. And you're kind of like, well, no, it doesn't. And let me think about it some, and let's, but such an urgency to change people's minds or to be right now. Yeah. It's just kind of like, well, that's okay. That's not the way I see it, but I'll think about it.
Yeah. Exactly. Before we get out the door, Bangs again, who knows great things from who knows where, what his sources are.
I think he's a robot, to be honest. I'm going to throw that out there. I'm pretty sure he is.
RX7 Elements is free through August at Plugin Boutique with any purchase. That's interesting. So anyway, time to go watch Todd and Rob.
Why he doesn't show pictures of himself, because he's AI.
That's it. See, if we were smart, we would have asked him whatever his podcast, and then we could dig in deeper and trace it down,
or divide by 0 or something. Because that always, or what's the questions in science fiction that have always crashed the computers? It always seems like I've seen where it does not compute. Star Trek's got one of those. I can't remember. Spock asks it some question and it starts freaking out. So I'll go back to the Star Trek episode, find that, and then next time Bangs is on, I'm going to ask him that question to prove he is a bot.
Yeah. What is it like to love someone? Oh, it's just yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Spock, Spock was pretty smart. He was pretty smart. My wife
and he could do this. So
yeah, you made that up. That was a last minute kind of. They kind of made up his character as they went along. Like none of that stuff. A lot of it wasn't planned. It just came as they were writing. They just started writing it in.
One of the best examples, we talked about feedback today, is in the original, I think pilot or something of Star Trek, of that version of Star Trek, the Kirk version, William Shatner was not the captain. Some other dude was. They ran it in front of an audience and went, it's pretty cool, but that guy's not cutting it for me.
Yeah,
and
Mike was the original. And then they turned that pilot into an episode later.
Interesting. Yeah, but they so they changed it to Shatner, and the rest is history. So
all right, this week I am working on questions that AIs can bangs. Next week. Oh, actually, I'm not here next week. So
look at this.
It'll be 2 weeks.
You're not hearing this next week?
No, it's my mom's 90th birthday party.
Oh, cool. All right. So I got to find a co-host for next week.
You do.
All right. Awesome. I will go back and see. I had a list at one point. So
yeah.
Awesome.
I haven't had to take a week off because we haven't had anything to do.
Yeah. How old is she?
This time she'll be 90.
Nice.
Yeah. So her health's not doing well, and so it's we're all going back. She's dead set on having this part. It's probably not a good way to say it, but she is set on having this part.
Yeah, exactly. Wrong button. Okay, there we go.
All right.
Well, have fun.
You bet.
And,
we'll see you.
All right, we'll see you. Take care. Bye-bye.